Kioma was past being ashamed. She held onto Maisie Okafor's trouser. Maisie Okafor, please, for the sake of the friendship that existed between my late father and you, help me beg the king. Have mercy on me. Please, have mercy. I would die without my daughter. The king walked into the scene and kicked her. Woman, all of this is your fault. Your stubbornness brought this upon your daughter, and nobody who goes against my words in this village would be spared. Guards, kill the man. Obinna was instantly brought forward and beheaded. Adana's heart could not bear the sight of the blood spilling out of Obinna's neck and immediately passed out. The king in his ruthlessness ordered the women in the crowd to pour water on her and revive her. Just as she was opening her eyes, the chief priest, who rarely saw eye to eye with the king, appeared. He stumped his staff on the ground and the sky immediately turned dark. He shouted with a thunderous voice,
I know you do not fear man or woman or regard any living thing, King Banzo, but I will not allow you commit this abomination of killing a pregnant woman in the land.
Just before the chief priest could open his mouth and say the next word, the king commanded his guards to seize him and behead him. The whole village watched in horror as the chief priest was beheaded. How dare he question my authority, he said with anger. I have had enough of this for today. Guards, take that lady into the forest and behead her. Let it be known in this land that no one dares question my decree irrespective of who you are. Anyone who does so will meet the same fate as this useless people today. Once upon a time in an ancient African kingdom called Ake, there lived a ruthless and vile king called Banzo, whose subject lived in fear and abject poverty. Everyone in the kingdom were subjected to serving him and his family, and anyone who dared object was put to death. Every now and then, he would come up with different decrees to further add to the pain and maltreatment his subjects were going through. Farmers were commanded to give 65% of their produce to the king, and traders 60% of their profit. The villagers grumbled quietly, and those who dared revolt against this order were killed. Villagers secretly sought the gods for help in putting an end to their pain, and were told that only a child born out of a forbidden union by the king could bring an end to the reign of the king, and also restore order to the land. Years went by, and the king, in his usual manner, made another decree across the land banning marriages or relationships between his subjects and anyone not from their village. Anyone found going against this rule will be put to death. Meanwhile, in a household somewhere in the village, a mother is seen having a hot argument with her daughter. I said I won't leave Obinna, Mama, and that's final, Adana said in an almost screaming voice. Her mom looked over her with pity. My dear daughter, I know how much you love Obinna, and I admire what the two of you share, but you heard the new decree the king just made, and Obinna is not from our village, so you can't continue seeing him. Mama, I refuse to live under fear. Are you not tired of the way we're living? First, it's the decree of banning any indigene from leaving the village to go live in another town, followed by you and Papa working tirelessly without anything to show forth just because a man who is so full of himself and doesn't regard anyone demands it. And now he wants to control who we fall in love with too? Never, Mama. This is where I draw the line. I love Obinna, and if the price I have to pay for that is death, then so be it. Ada had met Obinna during a visit to the neighboring village with her mother to buy provisions to sell in the market. The connection between them had been instant, and she found every possible excuse to follow her mother on subsequent trips to his village, as they were only allowed to go out of their village to buy produce twice in a month. As months went by, she and Obinna grew closer and had come up with a secret plan to meet somewhere in the forest where no one would be able to see them or dictate the time they spend with each other. And even though her parents found out months later, they couldn't be bothered as they believed in her right to go out with whoever she wanted. Kioma looked at her daughter with a mix of pity and fear. She knew what it was to be in love and remembered how she had fought with her parents when they objected to her marrying her husband just because of his background. Her own late father was one of the chiefs in the village, and hence some of the laws didn't apply to them and their household. But the rule was for them to make sure their children married within themselves, if not they would lose that privilege. Kioma decided to let go of all the privileges when she chose her husband, and even though the cruelty and the way commoners live sometimes get the best of her, she would still make the choice to follow her husband over and over again. But this was different. The penalty for the path her daughter was following was death, and her father was no longer alive to even sit with the king and plead should she be caught. Chioma went on her knees and started crying. Adana, please, my daughter. You're the only child I have, and I can't bear to lose you. You can always find another man in the village to marry. After all, Mazi Okafor has a son who is willingly to marry you, and all his family is in support, and you would also enjoy the benefit of being married to someone from the chieftain family, since your grandfather was one of them before he passed. Tears welled up in Adana's eyes as she knelt before her mother. Mama, I'm sorry, but I can't abandon Obina. I'm carrying his child. I promise to be more careful going forward. She could feel the tension running through her mother's body as her body stifled. Chioma stood up and kept staring at her daughter. How did I miss this? Yes, I have noticed her getting tired and all sort in the last 2 months, but I just felt she was just fatigued from the farm work and helping out in the market. Tears streamed down her face as she knew there was no turning back. Chioma immediately relayed the event of the day to her husband when he came back from farm in the evening, and the quietness of her once lively home made her know that things would never be the same again. Little did they know that all of this was the doing of the gods. Adana sneaked out of the house before dawn the following day to meet Obina. She ran, hugged him, and started crying upon sighting him. I told Mama and Papa already, Obi. I think they're disappointed in me. My father hasn't even spoken a word to me since my mother told him. I'm scared and I don't know what to do. Obina held her closely and kept rubbing her back. Don't worry, my love, we're going to be fine. We would find a way around it. The gods will give us the wisdom needed to deal with this. Obi and Ada kept meeting secretly in this manner for long until her baby bump started to grow. Villagers started to whisper and gossip among themselves, but no one dared question her or her parents as the words were too heavy to say. During one of Ada's early morning visit to Obi, Mazi Okafor caught them together as they were making plans to go their separate ways. Stop there, he shouted. Who are you and what are you doing in the forest at this time of the day? Ada tried to hide behind Obi so Mazi Okafor wouldn't see her face, but it was already too late. Who am I seeing, or are my eyes deceiving me? Is this not Adana? He burst out laughing. The trap has finally caught the hunter. Is this not the same lady that my son has been begging for her hand in marriage for over 2 years now? So this is who you went for, instead of my son who can deliver your family from your misery. Like mother, like daughter. He spat. And you even have the audacity to disobey the king's order. So this is the father of the child you are carrying. Never. That abomination of a child will not be allowed to live. Obina thought of fighting back and escaping with the woman he loved and his unborn child, but he knew he would be overpowered by Mazi Okafor's bodyguards. Besides, Adana couldn't run fast with her condition. Today was meant to be the last day they would meet cause of her state, as he felt the stress of walking to and from the forest was becoming too much for her, and even though Ada had objected, he had insisted and told her fate would make a way for them someday. Just as he was thinking of dismissing the thought and attacking Mazi Okafor, his boys appeared from the bush, and he ordered them to match Ada and Obi to the palace. The king came out into the court, and Mazi Okafor explained the situation to him. You mean this lady right here is the granddaughter of Chief Nzi, the one whose daughter insisted on marrying a commoner? Yes, my king, he replied. He let out an evil laughter. I think there seems to be a blood of rebellion running in their family, and we must put an end to it now. The king immediately called for a town meeting and told the guards to prepare for execution. Immediately, Chioma heard the drum beat. Something within her told her it had something to do with her daughter. Although they had first disagreed with her going out every morning to meet Obina, they later gave in and just allowed her do whatever she wanted. She quickly ran to Ada's room to check if she was back, but as she got closer, her room, something within her told her it would be empty. She opened the door to Ada's room with her trembling fingers, and upon finding it empty, she collapsed on the floor and started weeping. She couldn't cry out for fear of inviting the villagers. What if, just what if it wasn't about Ada, what would she say? Her husband had been selected as part of the group to go clear a portion for the king in a newly captured village and would not be back till the following week. She immediately wiped her face and ran to the market square. She collapsed upon seeing her daughter and Obina tied to a tree in the middle of the market. Other women around quickly rushed to hold her so she wouldn't injure herself. Please pity me, She is my only daughter. She's still small and doesn't know what she's doing. She doesn't fully understand the gravity of her offense, she said, amidst tears. Mazi Okafor, with his evil grin, turned to her shameless woman. After all, she followed your footstep. If only you had forced her to marry my son, all of this wouldn't be happening. But you kept going on and on about how she had a choice, Shibi. We have all seen the choice, he said mockingly. Chioma was past being ashamed. She held on to Mazi Okafor's trouser. Mazi Okafor, Biko, please, for the sake of the friendship that existed between my late father and you, help me beg the king. Have mercy on me, please. Have mercy. I would die without my daughter. The king walked into the scene and kicked her. Woman, all of this is your fault. Your stubbornness brought this upon your daughter, and nobody who goes against my words in this village would be spared. Guards! Kill the man. Obinna was instantly brought forward and beheaded. Ada's heart could not bear the sight of the blood spilling out of Obinna's neck and immediately passed out. The king, in his ruthlessness, ordered the women in the crowd to pour water on her and revive her. Just as she was opening her eyes, the chief priest, who rarely saw eye to eye with the king, appeared. He stumped his staff on the ground, and the sky immediately turned dark. He shouted with a thunderous voice,
I know you do not fear man or woman, or regard any living thing, King Banzo, but I will not allow you commit this abomination of killing a pregnant woman in the land.
Just before the chief priest could open his mouth and say the next word, the king commanded his guards to seize him and behead him. The whole village watched in horror as the chief priest was beheaded. How dare he question my authority, he said with anger. I have had enough of this for today. Guards, take that lady into the forest and behead her. Let it be known in this land that no one dares question my decree, irrespective of who you are. Anyone who does so will meet the same fate as this useless people today. Chioma kept watching in horror as two of the guards dragged her almost lifeless daughter into the forest. The other women in the village had held her down and prevented her from running after her daughter. As the punishment for that was death, of what good is her being alive anyways? They might as well kill her, but she was too tired to break loose from the grip of the women holding her. The two guards kept dragging Ada's almost lifeless body into the forest until they got to a part they felt was deep enough. One of the guards touched her wrist and noticed she still had a faint pulse. He turned to the other guards and said, I think she's dead already. Let's just live her and allow the vultures deal with her. He said this, hoping that someone would get to her and save her before she dies. He has never been a fan of the king and his wicked ways, but the fear of paying with his life and that of his family had made him stay back in the palace. But one sin he wasn't going to add to his conscience is that of killing a pregnant woman. The other guard looked at him and for some strange reasons agreed with him and decided they should head back to the village. Meanwhile, somewhere in the shrine, the chief priest's son Ike was seen packing his load. His father already told him he was going to confront the king, and if a particular light in the shrine should go off, he should know that he has been killed by the king and should immediately pack his load and run to their hideout in the forest, and that the gods will lead him on what to do from there. Ike packed some of his clothes and the important things his father had told him to carry with him. He knew the time to mourn his father wasn't now, as the king's guard would come burn down the shrine at any moment. He took a last look around the shrine and picked up his bag and ran as fast as his legs could carry him. After about an hour into his journey, he sighted a woman lying helplessly on the ground, and even though his first instinct was to leave her and keep running to safety, but he remembered all the teachings of his father and decided to check if she was still alive. He bent down to check her pulse and noticed she still had a faint pulse, even though she was already looking pale and like someone who could give up the ghost at any point. He reached for his bag and brought out water and one of his father's concoctions. Adana was immediately revived, and if not for the tiredness she felt in her body, she had wanted to stand up and run, but there was a reassurance in the eyes of her helper that she couldn't quite place that made her feel relaxed. Ike gave her something to eat, and they both ate in silence. Ike broke the silence after some time and asked if she had gathered enough strength to walk, and she nodded yes. He stood up and grabbed her. She leaned on him and they kept walking for what felt like the whole day. They arrived at his hideout later in the evening and settled there to rest. Ake Kingdom had not always been this terrifying and unpeaceful place to live. In fact, it was one of the first choice of people from neighboring villages when it came to trading and farming. Some even went as far as moving permanently to the village to settle down. However, things took a downward turn when the ruling king died 45 years ago, and his son refused to let tradition take its course. 45 years ago, the people of AK Kingdom gathered before the sacred shrine, awaiting the chief priest's final verdict on who would ascend the throne. 3 years had passed since the last king's death, and by tradition, the next ruler was to come from the second ruling family. However, the late king's son, Banzo, refused to accept this. My father ruled for only 10 years before his death, while the previous king from the other family ruled for 43 years. Now you expect me to stand aside and let the kingship return to them? Never, Banzo declared fiercely. After years of persuasion from the chief priest and village elders, with Banzo and some of his men causing unrest in the village, Banzo reluctantly agreed to step down unknown to them that his compliance was a sham. Banzo secretly conspired with Okafor, one of the palace guards who was loyal to his father, to assassinate the new king, promising him a position among the chiefs once he claimed the throne. The chief priest, after performing the sacred rites, proclaimed Ugemba, Adana's paternal grandfather, as the new king. The village erupted in joyous celebration. Women gathered at the palace to cook, and palm wine tappers ensured fresh palm was available all through the period of celebration. For days, the kingdom was alive with festivity. However, on the final day of the celebrations, the mood shifted drastically. As the villagers assembled in front of the palace to conclude the festivities, their joy was abruptly cut short by the sound of terrified screams and wailing from within. Moments later, one of the elders came out to address them. "The king is dead, and the queen has fled the palace with her children," he announced. "Return to your homes and do not step outside for the next 3 days." Chaos soon followed. While the chief priest sought answers from the oracles, Banzo, having bribed key elders, declared himself king, and his reign of terror began. The oracle instructed the chief priest to remain calm, for in due time, the rightful heir would return. Present day. Dr. Ifeoma tossed and turned in bed all night, unable to sleep. The haunting image of her father lying lifeless and her mother fleeing the village with them had remained vivid in her mind, even after 44 years. During their escape through the forest, her twin brother had gone missing. Their mother had instructed them to rest until dawn before continuing their journey. But when they woke up, he was nowhere to be found. Their mother had instructed Ifeoma and her younger sibling to stay put while she searched for him. She returned by noon alone, and with a heavy heart, she told them they had to keep moving. Ifeoma had pleaded to go back and look for him, but her mother insisted it was too dangerous, as the guards were still searching for them. With tears streaming down their faces, they pressed on. For 3 days they walked, stopping only to rest and surviving on the little food they had. Eventually, they arrived in a bustling town filled with large, moving objects carrying people, something Ifeoma would later come to know as cars. Their first few years in the town was that of hardship with their mum, doing everything to make sure they had a proper life. They lived in houses that even the slaves in her father's house wouldn't live in. Their mother, upon learning about school, had enrolled them in one of the free primary schools in the community, and luckily for her and her sibling, the school provided them with lunch, which sometimes was the only food they would eat all through the day. Free education had been their saving grace, and it was one thing she would forever be grateful for. It turned her life and that of her family around, and she had made a vow to send as many people as she can to school, as it was a tool of empowerment that is capable of changing anyone's life. But that was not the issue this morning. She has been having recurrent dreams of seeing a crying baby in the forest all alone, and something within her kept telling her only her could change the fate of the baby. She got up, left a note by the bedside for her husband, who was fast asleep, and picked up her car keys. She kept driving and driving without any destination in mind, but anyone who saw her making turns would think she knew where she was going. After hours of endless driving, she found herself in a thick forest, and just when she was about making a turn, she had the cry of a woman in a nearby bush. It was one filled with so much pain. She got out of her car and kept following the sound of the cry. She came to a small hut in the bush and saw a pregnant woman lying down in pain and agony, with a man almost her age looking clueless and terrified standing beside her. These kids probably got each other pregnant and ran away from their parents, she thought within herself. Children of these days. Let's get her to the hospital quickly. Looks like she's going into labor already. Is there any hospital close by? She asked. Ikenna kept looking at her like she was mad. Hospital? Which one is that again? The women in our village handle cases like this, but from the way the woman was dressed, he could tell she wasn't from their area. Despite his hesitation, Ikenna helped her lift Adana into the car. As they drove, he nervously watched the unfamiliar machine in motion. Don't be afraid, Ifeoma reassured him. I felt the same way when I first saw a car. What's your name and that of the lady beside you? Ifeoma asked. Ikenna told her. Don't worry, I'm taking you both to where you would be taken care of. Adana had become a bit calm and slept off some minutes into the ride, but he couldn't help but check her pulse at intervals to make sure she was still alive. Ifeoma had so many questions running through her mind, but she knew it wasn't yet time to ask questions. First, they needed to get to the hospital and have the pregnant woman at the back of her car checked, and even the boy looked like someone who needed medical attention. She picked up her phone and sent a message to her husband, telling him she would be stopping by at the hospital so he wouldn't be worried. They got to the hospital, and Adana was immediately wheeled into the ward while Ikenna was told to sit at the reception area and wait for them. Dr. Ifeoma entered into the ward with them and told one of the nurses to get her stethoscope and told another to check the boy vitals. She instructed the nurses on what to do and told them she would be back the following day to check up on them. Ifeoma couldn't help but notice how the pregnant lady's face looks like that of her mother. Or could it be that she's my twin brother's daughter? Stop daydreaming, she told herself. Things like that only happen in movies, not real life. And although she had this deep feeling that her twin brother was still alive, but there was no way on earth the person she saw in the forest would be her brother's daughter. She got home and narrated the whole story to her husband, who advised her to make a police report just in case anything happened. She went to the police station the next day to file in a report before heading to the hospital. She got there and met Ikenna in Adana's room, and she could swear it was her mother she saw in that bed. They exchanged greetings, and Ikenna thanked her for helping them and also for taking care of Adana. We didn't have much time to talk yesterday, Ifeoma said. So tell me, how did you both end up in this situation? Ifeoma asked. Ikenna began telling his side of the story, followed by Adana, who shared hers. Ikenna couldn't take his eyes away from her. Wait, you're the pregnant woman my father went to stop the king from killing? He asked, his voice breaking. He collapsed to the floor, overwhelmed with emotions. It was as if the weight of the events from the past few days had finally hit him. Adana, too, was unable to hold back her tears. She remembered the pain in her mother's eyes as she watched her, alongside the lifeless body of Obinna. Ifeoma sat there, unsure whether to ask them more questions or leave them in their moment of grief. She chose the latter. I'll be back, she said softly. I need to speak with my mother. The name of your village and the king you mentioned sounds familiar, and I'm sure she would have more information. After telling her mother everything, with her sister listening in on the call, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, her mother spoke. I'll take the next available flight to Lagos, Ifeoma. Just do whatever you can to keep them in the hospital until I arrive. True to her word, Ifeoma's mother flew into the country the third day, and they went straight to the hospital. As she walked into the room, Adana felt as if she was seeing her father, but this time in a woman's form. Ikenna looked from Adana to the older woman, confusion evident on his face. Ifeoma couldn't help but recall how as a child, people would tease them and ask while she and her twin brother switched faces. She was her father's exact replica, while her twin brother took after their mother. There's definitely more to this story, she thought. Just as her mother was about to sit down, Adana suddenly cried out in pain. I think the baby is coming, Ifeoma said. She's only 8 months gone, but I guess the stress she's been under lately is triggering an early labor. Adana was quickly rushed to the labor room, where she gave birth to a baby girl. The baby was immediately placed in an incubator while Adana was taken back to her room. Ifeoma's mother cared for both Adana and the baby as if she had known them for years. After a week, when she saw that Adana had regained enough strength, she gently inquired about her parents the village she came from, and her story. She then gathered everyone together to share the tale of how her husband was killed many years ago, and how the current king, though pretending to have made peace with everyone, then clearly had an ulterior motive. She told them that she wasn't surprised by his attitude, and that Banzo deliberately isolated them from the outside world, knowing that the people would revolt once they saw how different life could be outside his control. Ifeoma's mother assured them that they would return to the village once Ada had fully recovered. She then took in Ikenna, Adana, and the baby. 3 months later, they traveled to the village of Akka. Finding their way was difficult at first, but with the help of Ike and Ifoma's mother, they eventually reached Aki. They parked their car in a nearby bush to avoid drawing attention and made their way to Ada's parents' house. When her parents saw her, they were in disbelief. They hugged her tightly, and if it hadn't been for the visitors in the room, her mother would have broken down in tears. Kioma looked from the old woman in the crowd to her husband, and even he appeared confused. They all sat down, and Ifeoma's mother began telling their story. Ada's father broke down in tears as he shared how he had lost his way when he went to pee that night. He fell into a ditch, and an old woman from their village found him, took him in and raised him as her own. But he has had a hard time remembering who he was before the fall since then. He believed the woman knew something about him, as she sometimes referred to him as king, but whenever he asked her if she knew him, she would tell him that the gods would reveal everything at the right time. The news about the death of Obina, the chief priest, and Ada, whom they had assumed was dead, had triggered all the memories within him. By the time he finished, there was not a single dry eyes in the room. Ifeoma stood up and walked over to hug her twin brother. They stood there for a long time, holding each other and weeping in each other's arms. Their mum joined them too, and after a while she told them about 2 of the elders that were yet to join King Banzo's crew that Ikenna told her about. The elders, upon seeing Ifeoma's mum, recognized her. "Our queen, we never knew you were still alive." She narrated the whole story to them, and how Adana's father was the one meant to take over from her husband, since what King Banzo did was an abomination. The elders gathered the villagers, sharing the tragic events and how Banzo's evil plot against Adana and her child had backfired, ultimately bringing about something far greater. The villagers immediately rallied together, marching to the king's palace, chanting, "King Banzo, you're a murderer, and the gods have rejected you." The palace guards tried to stop them, but some guard who either knew about Banzo's past crimes or disapproved of his oppressive rule sided with the villagers. Banzo and his family were dragged from the palace, and his fear was palpable when he saw Ifeoma's mother. "You thought I was dead, didn't you? No, I'm back with my family, and we are here to reclaim what's rightfully ours." The villagers burned down the homes of the corrupt chiefs, and King Banzo and his family were banished from the village. Adana's father was crowned king, and under his rule, education and other advancements transformed the village. Adana and her child, with Ifeoma's help, relocated abroad, where she enrolled in adult education and eventually pursued a law degree. Ikenna decided to stay in the village to continue his father's work, this time adding education to his efforts to best serve his people. Years later, he became a medical doctor, combining traditional and modern medicine to help the villagers. Kioma and her husband alternated between visiting their daughter and granddaughter outside the country and ruling the kingdom. A proper road was built to connect the village to the town, opening the door to numerous opportunities. Every year, the people of Ake gathered to celebrate their freedom from King Banzo's tyranny. Under the reign of Adana's father, they prospered and thrived, flourishing like never before. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more interesting stories.